Shut up, you ghetto trash! Officer Derek Manning's massive hands slammed the black woman's face against her BMW, her cheek crushed into cold metal. Dozens of phones shot up around Pike Street. Pedestrians froze in shock. A mother gasped and pulled her child away. The woman's breathing stayed calm. No tears, no begging, just deadly composure that made Manning rage harder. Think you're better than me? He shoved her face deeper into the hood. You're nothing but street garbage in fancy clothes. Her silk blouse wrinkled under his brutal grip. Manning's face twisted with pure hatred. The woman remained silent, dignified, unbroken. Have you ever witnessed someone's prejudice blind them so completely that they destroy their own life in seconds? 6 hours earlier, Dr. Amelia Washington's alarm buzzed at 6:30 a.m. Sunlight streamed through the windows of her Queen Anne home. The smell of fresh coffee drifted from the kitchen where her 17-year-old daughter Maya was already eating breakfast. Mom, you're actually taking a day off? Maya looked up from her textbook, surprised. Amelia smiled, adjusting her casual navy blazer. First one in 3 months. Aunt Sandra's been nagging me about lunch for weeks. She kissed Maya's forehead and grabbed her BMW keys. The garage door hummed open to reveal Seattle's crisp October morning. Her phone buzzed with work emails, but she ignored them. Today was supposed to be different. For 15 years, Dr. Washington had prosecuted civil rights violations for the Department of Justice. Her office walls displayed commendations from 3 presidents. Her case files contained names of corrupt officials now serving federal time. She'd built her career on one simple belief: justice delayed is justice denied. Her father had taught her that lesson. As a child in Birmingham, she'd watched him endure police harassment with quiet dignity. Stay calm, stay smart, stay alive, he'd whispered after officers searched their car for no reason. But never forget what they did. Now she held the power to make sure others never forgot either. Meanwhile, across town, Officer Derek Manning stared at his reflection in the precinct bathroom mirror. 12 years on the force, and still stuck on patrol. Dark circles ringed his eyes. His uniform felt tighter than it used to. The promotion list was posted yesterday. His name wasn't on it. Again. Instead, they'd promoted Officer Johnson, a black woman with half his experience. The department called it diversity initiatives. Manning called it reverse racism. His partner knocked on the door. Manning, let's roll. Got calls backing up. Manning splashed cold water on his face. The anger sat in his chest like a burning coal. Every traffic stop, every interaction, they all felt personal now. The city was changing. The department was changing. People who looked like his grandparents were becoming minorities in their own neighborhoods. He clipped his radio to his belt and headed for the patrol car. Today felt different, dangerous, like something was going to snap. Dr. Washington drove through downtown Seattle, her phone ringing constantly. She finally answered on the 4th call. Dr. Washington, we need you, her assistant's voice crackled through the speaker. The Morrison case just got complicated. New evidence came in overnight. She pulled over on Pike Street, hazard lights blinking. The Morrison case involved a police chief in Oregon who'd systematically targeted Latino families, the kind of case that could set federal precedent. Send me the files. I'll review them after lunch. She stepped out of her BMW, phone pressed to her ear as her assistant detailed the evidence. Federal buildings rose around her. The smell of coffee and seafood drifted from nearby restaurants. Street vendor Miguel Santos was setting up his lunch cart, radio playing soft jazz. 3 blocks away, Manning's patrol car rolled through traffic. His radio dispatcher announced minor violations, nothing exciting. His mood darkened with each routine call. All units be advised. Citizen complaint about vehicle blocking traffic on Pike Street near the market. Manning perked up. Pike Street ran through one of Seattle's nicer areas. Probably some entitled driver thinking rules didn't apply to them. His hand moved to the radio. Unit 47 responding. Dr. Washington noticed the growing line of cars behind her. She should move, but the Morrison evidence was crucial. Her assistant was describing witness testimonies that could lock up the corrupt chief for decades. She glanced at her watch. 1:47 p.m. Sandra was probably already at the restaurant wondering where she was. One more minute to finish this call, then she'd head to lunch. The autumn sun felt warm on her shoulders. Pedestrians walked by with shopping bags and coffee cups. A normal Tuesday in a city she'd grown to love. A city where justice usually worked, even if it took time. Manning's patrol car turned onto Pike Street. His eyes scanned for the reported vehicle blocking traffic. There, a black BMW with hazard lights. The driver was standing outside, talking on a phone like she owned the street. He couldn't see her face yet, but something about her posture annoyed him. Too confident, too comfortable, like she belonged there more than he did. His jaw tightened as he pulled over. Time to remind someone about respect for the law. Neither of them knew that the next 10 minutes would change everything. Officer Manning's boots hit the asphalt with deliberate force. His utility belt creaked as he approached the BMW. The woman stood with her back to him, phone pressed against her ear. Her professional blazer and confident posture immediately irritated him. "Ma'am, you need to move your vehicle," he called out, hand resting on his radio. Dr. Washington held up one finger without turning around. "Yes, I understand the timeline is critical," she spoke into her phone. "Make sure the witness statements are authenticated before we proceed." Manning's jaw clenched. The dismissive gesture felt like a slap. In his 12 years on the force, citizens jumped when he spoke. They showed respect. This woman acted like he was invisible. He stepped closer, his shadow falling across her. "Ma'am, I said move your car. Now." Dr. Washington turned, ending her call with a polite, "I'll call you back in 5 minutes." She looked at Manning with calm, professional eyes. "Officer, I apologize. I was handling an urgent work matter. I'll move immediately." Her composed tone and educated speech only fueled Manning's irritation. Everything about her screamed privilege, the expensive car, the designer clothes, the way she spoke like she was doing him a favor. "License and registration," he demanded, pulling out his citation book. "Certainly." Dr. Washington reached into her purse with slow, deliberate movements. "May I ask what violation I'm being cited for?" Manning's radio crackled with static. Other calls were backing up, but this woman's attitude needed adjustment. "Blocking traffic, creating a public hazard." Dr. Washington glanced at the street. Cars moved freely around her BMW, plenty of space on both sides. "Officer, there's adequate room for traffic to pass. I had my hazards on and was only stopped for—" "Don't tell me how to do my job," Manning cut her off. His voice rose, drawing attention from nearby pedestrians. "You people always have excuses." The phrase hung in the air like poison gas. Dr. Washington's expression didn't change, but her grip tightened on her license. She'd heard those words before, from judges, opposing counsel, and now this officer. Miguel Santos looked up from his lunch cart. The vendor had seen this dance too many times. His hand moved toward his phone. "Here's my license and registration," Dr. Washington said evenly. She handed over the documents, noting Manning's badge number, 4738. Manning examined her ID with exaggerated scrutiny. "Amelia Washington, Queen Anne address." He looked up with a sneer. "How's a woman like you afford a house in Queen Anne?" The question was illegal, discriminatory. Dr. Washington knew it. Manning knew it too, but he didn't care. "My employment is not relevant to this traffic stop, Officer Manning," she replied, reading his name tag. "I decide what's relevant." Manning moved closer, invading her personal space. His breath smelled like stale coffee and resentment. "Fancy address, fancy car, fancy clothes. Are you selling drugs, stealing, or just sleeping with the right people?" 3 pedestrians stopped walking. A woman with a stroller crossed to the other side of the street. Miguel Santos started recording on his phone, holding it low but steady. Dr. Washington's training kicked in. Stay calm, document everything, survive the encounter. Officer, I would like to complete this traffic stop and be on my way. When I'm ready, Manning snarled. Step away from the vehicle. I need to search for it. On what grounds? Manning's radio squawked with another call. His supervisor's voice crackled through. Unit 47, what's your status on Pike Street? Manning keyed his radio. In progress, Control. The subject is uncooperative. Dr. Washington opened her mouth to object, but Manning cut her off with a raised hand. Don't make this worse for yourself. She stepped back as Manning approached her BMW. His hands moved roughly across the exterior, checking under the bumpers and around the tires. Theater for the growing crowd. Pop the trunk, he commanded. Officer Manning, you don't have probable cause to search my vehicle. I smell marijuana, Manning lied smoothly. That's all the cause I need. Dr. Washington's nostrils flared. The only smells were exhaust fumes and coffee from the nearby shops, but she knew arguing would escalate things dangerously. The trunk opened with a soft click. Manning rifled through her belongings like he was searching a crime scene. Her gym bag hit the pavement. Her emergency roadside kit scattered across the asphalt. What do we have here? Manning held up a small leather portfolio. Looks expensive. Where'd you steal this? That's my work portfolio. Please handle it carefully. Manning opened it roughly, papers scattering in the breeze. Dr. Washington watched legal briefs from her current cases flutter toward the gutter. Federal documents marked confidential landed on dirty concrete. A small crowd had formed. 6 people now watched the spectacle, most recording with their phones. Their faces showed a mixture of fascination and horror. Manning's radio crackled again. Unit 47, we have a domestic disturbance call waiting. What's your ETA? Still busy here, Control, Manning replied, his voice sharp with annoyance. Dr. Washington glanced at her watch. 2:03 p.m. Sandra would be wondering where she was. The Morrison case files waited on her desk. Her normal Tuesday had become a nightmare. Manning continued his illegal search, dumping out her purse contents. Lipstick rolled across the sidewalk. Her phone charger tangled with car keys. He held up her wallet like it was evidence. Credit cards in your name, he said with mock surprise. Either you're very good at identity theft, or someone's paying your bills. The racist implications were clear. Dr. Washington felt heat rising in her chest, but kept her voice level. Officer Manning, I've cooperated fully with your requests. May I please gather my belongings and leave? When I say you can leave, Manning kicked at her scattered papers. Maybe we should discuss where you really got the money for all this nice stuff. Miguel Santos stepped forward. Officer, she's not bothering anyone. Why don't you just let her go? Manning whirled around. Step back, sir. This is official police business. I'm just saying. I said step back. Manning's hand dropped to his holster. Miguel raised his hands and retreated, but kept his phone recording. The crowd murmured uneasily. This was escalating beyond a simple traffic stop. Dr. Washington gathered her scattered papers with quiet dignity. Each document she picked up from the dirty street was another civil rights violation she would remember. Another detail for the federal complaint she was already composing in her mind. Manning watched her collect her belongings with growing irritation. Her calm competence infuriated him. Most people would be crying or arguing by now. This woman acted like she belonged here, like she was in control. That needed to change. Stand up slowly, Manning commanded as Dr. Washington reached for the last of her papers. Keep your hands visible. She complied, her movements careful and non-threatening. The autumn sun caught the determination in her eyes, not defiance, but something deeper. Purpose. Manning stepped closer, close enough that she could smell his sweat mixed with aftershave. His radio chattered with increasing urgency about other calls, but he ignored it. "You know what I think?" Manning's voice dropped to a whisper meant only for her. "I think you're not as smart as you pretend to be." The crowd held its breath. Phones captured every second. And somewhere in the distance, sirens wailed toward other emergencies while Officer Derek Manning made the biggest mistake of his career. Manning's radio squawked again. His supervisor's voice cut through the tension. "Unit 47, respond to your radio. We have priority calls backing up." Manning ignored it, his focus locked on Dr. Washington. The growing crowd of witnesses irritated him. Their phones pointed at him like weapons. Their whispers felt like accusations. A coffee shop employee stepped outside to watch, wiping her hands on her apron. "Turn around," Manning commanded. "Hands on the car." Dr. Washington's pulse quickened, but her voice stayed steady. "Officer Manning, what is the reason for this escalation?" "I said turn around!" Manning's shout echoed off the surrounding buildings. A woman pushing a stroller hurried past, pulling her child closer. The baby started crying from the sudden noise. Dr. Washington slowly turned and placed her palms on her BMW's warm hood. The metal was smooth beneath her hands, still holding heat from the engine. She could feel the crowd watching, their phones capturing every second of her humiliation. The autumn sun beat down on her back. Manning stepped behind her, close enough that she could feel his breath on her neck. His cologne mixed with the smell of sweat and aggression. His hands moved to her shoulders, pressing down with unnecessary force. "You've been acting suspicious since I got here," Manning lied loudly, playing to his imaginary audience of supporters. "Nervous, evasive, making furtive movements toward your vehicle." Miguel Santos called out from his cart, his accent thick with emotion. "She hasn't done anything wrong, man." Manning whirled toward the vendor, his hand dropping to his holster. The leather creaked as his fingers found the grip. "I told you to stay back. One more word and you're under arrest for interfering with police business." Miguel fell silent but kept recording. His hands shook as he held his phone steady. Other vendors along the street had stopped serving customers to watch the spectacle unfold. Dr. Washington remained motionless against her car. The professional composure her father had taught her was being tested like never before. She could hear his voice from decades ago. "Stay calm, baby girl. Stay smart. Stay alive. But remember everything." Manning returned his attention to her, running his hands along her arms in what he claimed was a pat-down search. His touch was invasive, lingering longer than necessary on her shoulders and back. Professional boundaries meant nothing to him now. "What's this?" Manning grabbed her blazer pocket roughly, his thick fingers digging into the fabric. "Feels like something hard. Could be a weapon. Could be drugs." It was her phone. Dr. Washington knew it. Manning knew it. But he was building his false narrative for the crowd. The performance was everything now. "That's my cell phone, officer." "I'll decide what it is." Manning reached into her pocket, his fingers deliberately rough and intrusive. He pulled out her iPhone and examined it like evidence of criminal activity. "Expensive phone. Latest model. How does someone like you afford this?" The racist implications hung in the air like smoke. A young black man in the crowd shook his head in disgust. An elderly white woman looked uncomfortable but said nothing. Dr. Washington bit back her response. Every word she said now could be twisted against her. She'd seen it happen in courtrooms across the country. Manning's radio erupted with urgent chatter. Multiple units were requesting backup for real emergencies. His supervisor's voice cut through with increasing frustration. "Manning, respond immediately or report to the station. That's a direct order." Manning keyed his radio with violent force, the plastic cracking under his grip. "Unit 47 is code 6 with a suspicious subject, requesting backup for a possible felony arrest." Dr. Washington's blood chilled. She knew police codes. Code 6 meant busy, unavailable. He was buying time for whatever he planned to do next. "Officer, I haven't committed any crime warranting arrest." "Obstruction of justice," Manning snarled, spittle flying from his lips. resisting lawful orders, public disturbance, possible drug possession. Every charge was fabricated. Dr. Washington knew it. The crowd knew it. Manning knew it too, but he was past caring about truth or consequences. A teenage boy in the crowd shouted, his voice cracking with indignation, "Leave her alone! She's not doing anything wrong!" Manning's head snapped toward the voice. His face was red now, sweat beading on his forehead despite the cool autumn air. The veins in his neck bulged with rage. "Everyone back up! This is a crime scene. Anyone interfering will be arrested." Crime scene. The words were absurd. Dr. Washington was guilty of nothing more than taking a phone call while black in Seattle, but Manning's delusions were becoming increasingly dangerous. More people had stopped to watch. A businessman in a suit stood frozen on the sidewalk. 2 college students recorded everything on their phones. The crowd was approaching 20 people now. "Officer Manning," Dr. Washington said carefully, choosing each word with precision, "I would like to speak to your supervisor." The request hit Manning like a physical blow. In his twisted worldview, she was challenging his authority in front of witnesses, embarrassing him, making him look weak and incompetent. "You don't get to make demands," Manning growled, his voice dropping to a threatening whisper. He grabbed her wrist and twisted it behind her back. Not enough to break bone, but enough to cause sharp shooting pain. Dr. Washington gasped despite herself, her professional composure cracking for the first time. The crowd stirred uneasily. Several people called out in protest. Miguel Santos stepped forward again, his phone capturing everything with shaking hands. "Stop it!" a woman shouted from the crowd. "You're hurting her! Someone call the real police!" Manning's other hand moved to his handcuffs. The metal clanked ominously as he pulled them from his belt. The sound sent shivers through the watching crowd. "You're under arrest for obstruction of justice, resisting arrest, and suspicion of drug possession," Manning announced loudly. "I haven't resisted anything," Dr. Washington said through gritted teeth. The pain in her wrist was sharp and constant, but she kept her voice level. "And you have no evidence of any drug activity." "You resisted when you questioned my authority," Manning replied. His logic was circular, his reasoning corrupt, but he held all the power in this moment. "That's all the evidence I need." The handcuffs clicked as Manning opened them. The metallic sound was captured clearly on multiple phone recordings. This had gone far beyond a traffic stop into something much darker. Dr. Washington's mind raced through legal precedents. Dozens of cases she'd prosecuted flashed through her memory. Officers who'd abused their power just like this. Citizens who'd died in police custody after similar encounters. The thin, fragile line between justice and brutality. Manning fumbled with the handcuffs, his hands shaking with adrenaline and rage. The crowd's attention was getting to him now. Their phones felt like spotlights exposing his every illegal move. A siren wailed in the distance, but it was heading away from them toward some other emergency. No one was coming to help. "Turn around," Manning commanded again, his voice hoarse with emotion. Dr. Washington slowly turned to face him. For the first time, she saw the full extent of his rage. His eyes were wild, unfocused, pupils dilated with adrenaline. This wasn't just prejudice anymore. It was something approaching complete mental breakdown. "Please, Officer Manning," she said quietly, trying one last time to de-escalate. "I'll cooperate completely with whatever you need. There's no need for handcuffs or further escalation." Manning heard her calm, educated tone as condescension, her dignity as defiance. Everything about her professional demeanor reminded him of every promotion he'd been denied, every evaluation that criticized his interpersonal skills, every moment he'd felt overlooked or undervalued. The crowd pressed closer, sensing something terrible was about to happen. Miguel Santos had called 911, but help seemed impossibly far away. "You think you're better than me," Manning whispered, close enough that only she could hear. His breath was hot against her face. "With your fancy car and your educated voice and your expensive clothes, but you're nothing. Just another criminal who got caught. The handcuffs gleamed in the afternoon sun as Manning raised them. Dr. Washington's heart hammered against her ribs, but she kept her breathing steady, controlled. That's when Manning made his fatal, career-ending mistake. "This is what happens when you don't know your place," Manning snarled loud enough for everyone to hear. His massive hands grabbed Dr. Washington's shoulders and slammed her face first against the BMW's hood. The impact was brutal, deliberate, and completely captured on multiple phones from every angle. Her cheek crushed against cold metal, her blazer bunched up around her shoulders, her silk blouse wrinkled under Manning's brutal grip. The crowd gasped, and several people screamed in horror. "Stop!" Miguel Santos shouted, abandoning all caution. "Someone call 911! This is police brutality!" Manning pressed her face harder against the car, his full weight behind the assault. "Think your fancy clothes make you special? Think again, princess." Dr. Washington's manicured nails scraped against the BMW's paint as she tried to maintain balance. Every second of humiliation was being documented from multiple angles by horrified witnesses. But something had fundamentally changed in her eyes. The fear was still there, but underneath it was something else entirely. A cold, calculating fury that came from 15 years of prosecuting men exactly like Derek Manning. Her breathing remained controlled despite the pain and humiliation. Her voice, when she spoke, carried a quiet authority that somehow cut through Manning's rage. "Officer Manning, you need to step back right now." Manning laughed, the sound harsh and bitter, echoing off the surrounding buildings. "Or what? You'll call your lawyer? File a complaint?" Dr. Washington's right hand slowly moved toward her jacket pocket. Manning was too lost in his power trip, too intoxicated by the violence to notice the deliberate movement. "I'm going to reach into my pocket," she said clearly, her words carrying to the crowd and their cameras. "Don't move," Manning shouted, pressing her harder against the hood. "Keep your hands where I can see them." "I need you to see something," Dr. Washington continued, her voice steady as granite, unshakable as bedrock. The crowd held its collective breath. 20 phones captured every second from every angle, and in her pocket, Dr. Washington's fingers closed around the leather badge holder that was about to change everything forever. Dr. Washington's fingers emerged from her jacket pocket holding a black leather badge holder. The federal seal caught the afternoon sunlight like a mirror, flashing gold and silver. Manning barely glanced at it, still drunk on his own power. "What's that supposed to be? Some fake ID you bought online?" "Look at it carefully, Officer Manning." Something in her voice made him pause. The tone had shifted completely, from victim to authority. Manning squinted at the badge holder, his brain struggling to process what he was seeing. The seal of the United States Department of Justice stared back at him. Below it, a federal prosecutor's badge gleamed in pristine condition. The photo showed the same woman he had pinned against the car, but in the image she wore the confident expression of someone who held real power. Manning's hands went numb. He stumbled backward, releasing his grip on Dr. Washington's shoulders. That's not real," Manning stammered, his voice cracking like a teenager's. "You're trying to impersonate a federal agent." Dr. Washington straightened slowly, brushing wrinkles from her blazer with calm, deliberate movements. When she turned to face Manning, everything about her had changed. Gone was the compliant victim. In her place stood a federal prosecutor with 15 years of experience destroying corrupt cops, exactly like Derek Manning. "I am Dr. Amelia Washington, Senior Federal Prosecutor with the Civil Rights Division, United States Department of Justice," she announced, her voice carrying clearly across the intersection. The crowd erupted in gasps and murmurs. Phones captured Manning's face as the blood drained from it. Miguel Santos whispered, "Oh my God," in Spanish, his hands shaking as he recorded. Manning examined the badge again, his thick fingers trembling. The seal was perfect. The photo matched. The federal ID number was embossed in official DOJ format. This wasn't some street lawyer's business card. This was the real thing. You're... you're a federal prosecutor? Manning's voice was barely a whisper. Specializing in police misconduct and civil rights violations, Dr. Washington replied, tucking the badge back into her pocket. And you, Officer Manning, have just provided me with enough evidence for a federal case that will follow you for the rest of your life. Manning's knees nearly buckled. 12 years on the force, and he'd just assaulted a federal prosecutor in broad daylight, in front of 20 witnesses, all of it captured on multiple phones from every angle. I didn't know, Manning pleaded, his earlier aggression evaporating like steam. Ma'am, I had no idea who you were. Dr. Washington's eyebrows rose slightly. So you only assault citizens you think can't fight back? The question hit like a physical blow. Manning's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. Every response he could think of would only make things worse. The crowd sensed the power shift immediately. The businessman in the suit stepped closer. The college students exchanged excited whispers. Miguel Santos grinned behind his phone camera. Officer Manning, Dr. Washington continued, her voice carrying the authority of every federal courthouse she'd ever worked in. You are now the subject of a federal civil rights investigation under Title 18, Section 242 of the United States Code. Manning's radio crackled to life. Unit 47, respond immediately. Captain Morrison wants to speak with you. As if summoned by the mention of his name, Captain Morrison's patrol car rounded the corner, emergency lights flashing. Manning's supervisor had finally arrived to see what was taking so long. Captain Morrison stepped out of his vehicle and immediately assessed the scene. 20 witnesses with phones. His officer looked like he'd seen a ghost, and a well-dressed black woman standing with the calm confidence of someone who held all the cards. Officer Manning, what's your status? Morrison called out as he approached. Dr. Washington turned toward the captain. Captain Morrison, I'm Dr. Amelia Washington, federal prosecutor. Your officer has just committed multiple felonies against a federal official. Morrison's face went white. He recognized her name immediately. She'd prosecuted 3 Seattle officers in the past 2 years. All 3 were now serving federal time. Dr. Washington, Morrison said carefully, I sincerely apologize for whatever has occurred here. Manning finally found his voice, desperation making him speak too fast. Captain, I was just doing a routine traffic stop. I had probable cause to search her vehicle. She was acting suspicious and... Shut up, Morrison hissed. Don't say another word. But Manning couldn't stop himself. The lies poured out like water from a broken dam. She was blocking traffic. She resisted my lawful orders. She wouldn't comply with basic instructions. Dr. Washington pulled out her phone and began scrolling through her recent calls. Officer Manning, I was speaking with my assistant at the Department of Justice when you approached. The call lasted 14 minutes and was recorded on federal servers. Would you like me to play back the part where you claimed to smell marijuana? Manning's face crumpled. Federal phone records couldn't be disputed or destroyed. Every lie he'd told was now documented evidence. Captain Morrison looked around at the crowd of witnesses, all still recording. This was going to be on the evening news within hours. Seattle PD's reputation would take another massive hit. Dr. Washington, Morrison said formally, I'm placing Officer Manning under immediate suspension pending a full investigation. Manning's hand moved toward his service weapon out of habit, but Morrison was faster. Badge and gun, Manning, right now. With shaking hands, Manning unpinned his badge and handed it over. His service weapon followed, the metal heavy in Morrison's hands. Dr. Washington watched the exchange with professional satisfaction. This was how justice was supposed to work: swift, decisive, and public. Officer Manning, she said quietly, you asked me earlier how I could afford my car and my house. The answer is simple. I've spent 15 years putting corrupt police officers in federal prison, and you just became my next case. Manning's career was over. His pension is gone. His future was destroyed. All because he couldn't see past the color of her skin to recognize the badge she carried. Manning stared at his empty badge holder, the reality of his situation finally sinking in. His hands trembled as he looked up at Dr. Washington, desperation replacing arrogance in his eyes. "Dr. Washington, please," Manning's voice cracked. "I'm sorry. I didn't know who you were. If I had known you were federal, I never would have—" "Stopped there," Dr. Washington interrupted, her voice sharp as a blade. "You never would have what? Assaulted me? Violated my constitutional rights? Used racial slurs?" Manning's apology died in his throat. His words had revealed the ugly truth. He thought respect was reserved only for people with badges and power. Captain Morrison stepped between them, his face grim. "Dr. Washington, on behalf of the Seattle Police Department, I offer our sincerest apologies for Officer Manning's conduct." "Captain Morrison," Dr. Washington replied coolly, "your officer didn't just have conduct issues. He committed multiple federal felonies in broad daylight." The crowd pressed closer, sensing the drama was far from over. Miguel Santos had been live streaming for the past 10 minutes. His viewer count had climbed to over 15,000 people watching in real time. Dr. Washington pulled out her phone and began making calls. "This is Dr. Amelia Washington, DOJ Civil Rights Division. I need an FBI evidence team at Pike Street and 2nd Avenue immediately." Manning's knees buckled. FBI involvement meant this was beyond Seattle PD's ability to cover up or minimize. Federal agents would interview every witness. They'd subpoena every phone video. His life was unraveling in real time. "Dr. Washington," Manning pleaded again, "I have a wife and kids, a mortgage. I've been on the force 12 years. Please don't destroy my family over this." Dr. Washington looked at him with cold fury. "Did you consider my family when you slammed my face into a car? Did you think about my daughter watching this on the news?" Captain Morrison pulled Manning aside, his voice low and urgent. "Manning, you need to shut up right now. Anything you say will be used against you in federal court." But Manning couldn't stop himself. The desperation made him babble. "I was just doing my job. Traffic enforcement. Routine stop. She was blocking the street and acting suspicious." Every word was another nail in his coffin. Dr. Washington took notes on her phone as Manning continued digging his legal grave. A Seattle PD internal affairs car pulled up, emergency lights flashing. Detective Sarah Chen stepped out, her expression serious. She'd worked with Dr. Washington on previous cases and knew exactly how thorough federal prosecutors could be. "Dr. Washington," Chen said professionally, "I'll be handling the internal investigation. Can you provide a preliminary statement?" "Detective Chen," Dr. Washington replied, "I'll be filing a comprehensive federal complaint within 24 hours. This incident involves assault under color of authority, deprivation of civil rights, and numerous constitutional violations." Manning overheard and stumbled forward. "It wasn't an assault. It was a lawful detention. She was resisting." "I have 20 witnesses and multiple video recordings that say otherwise," Dr. Washington said calmly. Miguel Santos approached with his phone still recording. "Dr. Washington, I got everything on video, from the very beginning. You want me to send it to you?" "Thank you, sir. Please preserve all footage and contact my office. You'll likely be called as a witness in federal court." Manning's face went ashen. Federal court. The words hit him like physical blows. His pension was gone. His career was over. Criminal charges were inevitable. Captain Morrison's radio crackled with urgent messages. Word was spreading through the department. The chief wanted immediate reports. The mayor's office was asking questions. "Manning," Morrison said heavily, "you're suspended without pay pending investigation. Turn in your service weapon, radio, and all department property." Manning's hands shook as he handed over his equipment. Each item felt like another piece of his identity being stripped away. Dr. Washington watched the process with professional satisfaction, but no joy. She took no pleasure in destroying lives, even those of corrupt officers. But justice required accountability. "Officer Manning," she said quietly, "you asked me earlier how I could afford nice things. I'll tell you exactly how. I've spent my career prosecuting police officers who abuse their power, officers who think badges give them the right to brutalize citizens. Manning looked up with desperate eyes. And now, Dr. Washington continued, you're going to help me teach every other officer in this city what happens when they confuse a badge with a license to commit assault. The crowd began to disperse as FBI vehicles arrived on scene. Federal agents immediately began securing evidence and interviewing witnesses. Manning sat on the curb, head in his hands, as his world collapsed around him. His 12-year career was over. His pension is gone. His future was destroyed. All because he couldn't see past prejudice to recognize that real authority comes from justice, not violence. Within 3 hours, Miguel Santos's live stream had gone viral. The hashtag #FederalBadgeJustice exploded across social media platforms. By evening, the video had been shared over 100,000 times across Twitter, TikTok, and Instagram. CNN's breaking news banner flashed across screens nationwide. Federal prosecutor assaulted by Seattle police officer. The story led every major network's evening broadcast. Anderson Cooper opened his show with the dramatic footage of Dr. Washington revealing her badge. Good evening. Tonight, a story that perfectly captures the intersection of police misconduct and federal accountability, Cooper began as the now famous video played behind him. Dr. Washington sat in her Department of Justice office the next morning, reviewing the mountain of evidence that had poured in overnight. Her assistant knocked and entered with a thick folder. Dr. Washington, we've received over 200 pieces of video evidence from witnesses. The FBI digital forensics team says they have Manning's actions documented from 12 different angles. She nodded grimly. What about his disciplinary record? 17 complaints in 12 years. 3 formal reprimands for excessive force, 2 civilian complaints for racial profiling that were dismissed by Internal Affairs. Dr. Washington's jaw tightened. Manning hadn't been a good cop having a bad day. He'd been a predator in uniform, and the department had enabled him for over a decade. Meanwhile, across town, Manning sat in his lawyer's office, the weight of his situation finally hitting home. Attorney James Peterson spread the federal charges across his desk like a medical examiner displaying evidence of death. Derek, they're throwing the book at you, Peterson said bluntly. Federal civil rights violations under Section 242, assault under color of authority, deprivation of constitutional rights. We're looking at 2 to 10 years in federal prison. Manning's voice was barely a whisper. Can we make a deal? Peterson shook his head. They don't need to make deals. They have you on video committing federal crimes against a federal prosecutor. This case is going to trial, and it's going to be very public. The federal courthouse in downtown Seattle became a media circus. News vans lined the streets. Protesters held signs reading, "Justice for Dr. Washington," and "Badge doesn't mean immunity." The case had become a symbol of everything wrong with police accountability. Inside courtroom 4A, Dr. Washington sat in the gallery, watching federal prosecutors present her case. She'd recused herself from the prosecution to avoid conflicts of interest, but she wanted Manning to see her face every day of the trial. The prosecution played the video footage on the courtroom's large screens. Manning's voice echoed through the chamber. "Shut up, you ghetto trash!" The jury's faces showed disgust and horror. Manning's defense attorney tried desperately to paint his client as a dedicated officer who'd made an error in judgment. But the evidence was overwhelming. 12 different camera angles, 23 witness testimonies, federal phone records proving Manning's lies about probable cause. On day 3 of the trial, the prosecution called Dr. Washington to the stand. She wore a conservative Navy suit and spoke with calm authority that commanded the courtroom's attention. "Dr. Washington," the federal prosecutor began, "please tell the jury what you were thinking as Officer Manning pressed your face against your car." "I was thinking about my father," she replied, her voice steady. "He endured similar treatment from police in Birmingham in the 1960s. He taught me to stay calm, document everything, and never let them see you break." And what did you think when Officer Manning said you needed to know your place? Dr. Washington's eyes found Manning at the defense table. I thought about all the victims who couldn't fight back. All the people without federal badges who suffer this treatment have no recourse. The jury was transfixed. This wasn't just about one bad cop. It was about systemic abuse of power. Manning's wife sat in the gallery, tears streaming down her face as she watched her husband's life collapse on national television. Their mortgage was in foreclosure. Their children faced bullying at school. The family Manning claimed he was protecting had been destroyed by his actions. The jury deliberated for only 4 hours. The foreman stood to read the verdict. On the charge of deprivation of civil rights under color of law, we find the defendant guilty. Manning's shoulders slumped as guilty verdicts rang out for each federal charge. His lawyer patted his arm uselessly as deputies prepared to take him into custody. Judge Patricia Williams had seen hundreds of cases in her 20 years on the federal bench, but this one struck her as particularly egregious. Mr. Manning, Judge Williams began at sentencing, you took an oath to protect and serve. Instead, you used your badge as a license to commit assault based on racial prejudice. Manning stood to face his sentence, his orange jumpsuit a stark contrast to the blue uniform he'd worn with such arrogance. The court sentences you to 36 months in federal prison, followed by 2 years of supervised probation, Judge Williams announced. You are permanently banned from law enforcement and will serve as a reminder that no one is above the law. Manning collapsed into his chair as deputies approached to lead him away. His wife's sobs echoed through the courtroom. But the consequences extended far beyond one corrupt officer. Seattle Police Chief Maria Rodriguez announced sweeping reforms at a packed press conference. Today marks a new chapter for Seattle PD, Chief Rodriguez declared. We're implementing mandatory bias training, body cameras for all officers, and a civilian oversight board with real authority. The Manning case had become a catalyst for change. Police departments nationwide studied the video footage in training sessions. Law schools added the case to their civil rights curricula. Dr. Washington received invitations to speak at conferences across the country. 6 months after Manning's sentencing, Dr. Washington stood before a congressional committee, sharing her experience and advocating for federal police reform legislation. Chairman Thompson, she testified, what happened to me happens to countless Americans every day. The difference is, I had a federal badge to protect me. We need laws to protect everyone else. The legislation that emerged became known as the Washington Act, creating federal oversight for police departments with patterns of misconduct. Manning's moment of rage had inadvertently sparked the most comprehensive police reform in decades. Manning served his full sentence at a federal facility in Oregon. His cellmates knew he was a former cop, making his time particularly difficult. He lost 30 pounds, developed anxiety disorders, and spent most days in protective custody. Upon release, he found work at a warehouse outside Seattle, loading trucks for minimum wage. His wife had divorced him during his incarceration. His children barely spoke to him. Dr. Washington, meanwhile, was promoted to Deputy Assistant Attorney General for Civil Rights. Her office had become the most feared destination for corrupt police officers nationwide. The Manning case had transformed federal prosecution of police misconduct, ensuring that badges could never again shield officers from justice. 2 years after that fateful afternoon on Pike Street, Dr. Amelia Washington sat in her expanded corner office at the Department of Justice. Sunlight streamed through floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the National Mall. A framed photo of her father sat prominently on her desk, beside commendations from President Biden. Her daughter Maya, now a sophomore at Howard University studying civil rights law, video-called from her dorm room. "Mom, I saw your interview on 60 Minutes last night. Dad would be so proud." Dr. Washington smiled, touching the photo of her father. He always said justice delayed is justice denied. But he also taught me that sometimes one moment can change everything. That moment on Pike Street had indeed changed everything. Seattle's transformation was remarkable. Police complaints had dropped by 67% since the reforms began. Officer-involved shootings reached historic lows. The Civilian Oversight Board, with real authority to investigate and discipline, had become a model for cities nationwide. Chief Rodriguez had kept every promise made in those heated press conferences. Body cameras were mandatory. Bias training was intensive and ongoing. Officers who showed patterns of discrimination faced immediate review and retraining. But the changes extended far beyond Seattle. The Washington Act had passed Congress with bipartisan support, creating federal oversight for any police department with documented patterns of civil rights violations. 17 cities were now under federal consent decrees. Reform wasn't optional anymore. It was federally mandated. Dr. Washington's Civil Rights Division had expanded from 35 attorneys to over 200. They'd prosecuted 147 cases of police misconduct in the past 2 years, with a 94% conviction rate. The message was clear. Badges don't provide immunity from justice. Miguel Santos had used his viral fame to become an activist and documentary filmmaker. His film, Badge of Dishonor, won an Emmy Award and sparked conversations in living rooms across America. He still worked his lunch cart on Pike Street, now with a plaque commemorating that historic day. People ask me if I was scared, Miguel often told reporters. But somebody had to record it. Somebody had to be witness to what really happened. The intersection where it all began had changed, too. A small memorial garden honored victims of police violence. Tour groups stopped daily to hear the story of the federal prosecutor who stood up to power with nothing but truth and a badge. Derek Manning's story served as a cautionary tale in police academies nationwide. Training videos showed his transformation from confident officer to federal prisoner in real time. Recruits watched in silence as instructors explained how prejudice and abuse of power could destroy lives, including their own. Manning himself had disappeared into obscurity after his release. His warehouse job paid $12 an hour. His ex-wife had remarried and moved to Portland with their children. He lived alone in a studio apartment, forever marked as the cop who assaulted a federal prosecutor. Some nights, he watched news coverage of police reform and wondered if things might have been different, if he'd seen Dr. Washington as a human being instead of a target for his rage, if he'd chosen respect over prejudice. But those were the thoughts of a broken man whose moment of hatred had cost him everything. Dr. Washington faced her own moments of reflection. She'd become the face of police accountability, but the burden was heavy. Death threats arrived weekly. Her security detail had tripled. Some days, she wondered if the price of justice was worth paying. Then she'd remember her father's words. "Baby girl, change doesn't come easy, but somebody has to be willing to stand up, even when it's dangerous." The numbers told the story of progress. Police misconduct complaints had dropped 34% nationwide since the Manning case. Federal prosecutions of bad officers had increased by 400%. Public trust in law enforcement was slowly rebuilding in communities that had lost faith. But Dr. Washington knew the work was far from finished. Standing at her office window, watching tourists visit the Lincoln Memorial, she reflected on how one afternoon had rippled across the entire nation. Justice wasn't just about punishing the guilty. It was about preventing future victims. Her phone buzzed with another interview request. CNN wanted her perspective on the latest police reform legislation. The Today Show was doing a 2-year retrospective on the Manning case. 60 Minutes wanted a follow-up segment. She'd accept them all. The story needed to be told and retold until every officer understood that badges come with accountability, not immunity. As evening descended on Washington, D.C., Dr. Washington prepared to leave her office. Tomorrow would bring new cases, new challenges, new opportunities to bend the arc of justice toward equality. Her father's photo caught the last rays of sunlight. His smile seemed to say, "Well done, baby girl. Well done." But the work continued. Justice was not a destination. It was a journey that required constant vigilance. And Dr. Amelia Washington would keep walking that path, one case at a time, until equality was more than just a promise carved in marble. The badge in her jacket pocket carried the weight of that commitment, and the responsibility to ensure that what happened to her on Pike Street would spark change for generations to come. What would you have done in Dr. Washington's position? More importantly, what will you do the next time you see someone being treated unfairly? Share this story if you believe justice must be more than just a word. Follow for more stories where accountability triumphs over abuse of power. Because real change begins when ordinary people refuse to stay silent in the face of injustice.